we interrupt the Mint Fresh Toothpaste musical review with this bulletin from the WPOD News Wire. Dateline, Chicago. Billy Baddins, on the behest of Chicago socialite Julia Lessinger, has been investigating the why behind the death of her gangster boyfriend, Pretty Boy DeMaio. Billy's efforts have uncovered the theft of the singing sword. This talisman from his homeworld has attracted the attention of gang lord Al Capone, a museum curator, the United States government, and his client's high society rival, Ava Rothschild. At a black tie affair, Ava tried to play Billy for a fool in front of his client. But with Julia offering Billy a limousine home, our dwarf detective is about to get in the last word. And now you know the story so far. We return you to our regularly scheduled programming here on WPOD Chicago.
Chapter 13. Reading Between the Lines. The limousine rocked lightly as I hopped inside. Once the valet shut the door behind me, I gave the driver my home address. Modest in comparison to the mansion I was leaving behind, but still my own little hovel in the great concrete grove that was Chicago. Even with the absence of street lamps and interior lighting, I could still make out her form across from me. Wearing a dark crown of curls that gently cascaded down the back of her neck and across her shoulders, she was a vision that I wouldn't doubt could persuade men to charge in a battle, straight to their deaths. It was the kind of beauty that inspired loyalty, devotion, desire. Well, the last part for sure. I couldn't help but feel an urge kicking up from parts of me that hadn't known a woman's touch for quite some time. Julie Lessinger was still cut from the same cloth as Ava, so I couldn't let that urge for even a tiny tavern tickle throw me off guard. She had her reasons for accompanying me all the way into town. It was hardly for my company, stimulating as it might be. She didn't strike me as a baseball kind of gal. I wanted to know why she was here, and I knew if I were patient enough, she'd come around and tell me. Alright, screw patience. Hell, I'm a dwarf. We aren't known for it. Mind if I ask why you're taking this ride with me, Julie?
Perhaps I wanted assurance that you made it back to your place safely.
I'm a big boy. I can take care of myself. She gave a snicker, probably at the big boy comment. Yeah, let it slide, Baddins. After a few moments of staring at the distant city lights, she finally said,
Perhaps I've been thinking about your closing the case out Monday.
I tugged at my bow tie, letting it fall loose around my neck. Julie, you wanted to know the why behind Tony's demise, and you got it. What more do you want?
Billy, this singing sword that Tony died trying to steal is nothing more than a catalog number. Some inscriptions on a blade that no one can read, and a mystery without an answer. Why would Tony risk his neck on something like this? Why would a mobster like Capone want something like this singing sword? And why would Tony double-cross his boss when he was the next in line to succeed him?
She turned away from me again, and I could just make out her ghostly reflection in the car window.
This must be the frustrated academic in me. I'm not satisfied with the answers, so I continue to ask questions.
I wish I could tell you more. Yeah, I did. I wanted to tell her that DeMaio bit off more of his boss's power than he could chew, and Capone made him choke on it. I wanted to tell her about the singing sword and its immense power that was attracting the attention of everyone from gangland bosses to our own beloved Uncle Sam. How could I explain to her, an inquisitive mind in a society ready to keep her barefoot and pregnant in a glitzy castle somewhere, that what she already knew was more than enough? She spoke up again before I could.
In some strange way, I loved him. I truly did. It wasn't true love, nor was he a prince on a white horse. But that didn't mean I slept with him because it was convenient. When we were alone, things were different. I suppose I let myself believe he was genuinely interested.
She bowed her head with a spiteful laugh.
The higher you ascend in social circles, the harder sincerity is to come by.
It's harder still when you walk among thieves, rogues, and highwaymen, Julie. She turned to look at me.
Perhaps you're right. Perhaps I believed we had something that was never there. Or maybe I'm just trying to convince myself it wasn't part of Tony's plan to break into the Ryerson.
What's done is done, I said gently, trying not to sound like I was some kind of know-it-all elvish holy man. From what I've found out on this case, Tony got himself killed over an over-decorated letter opener. His choice.
I suppose.
I picked up a slight tremble in her voice. We were nearing the city limits now, the trees now registering as momentary interruptions of the Chicago skyline. Once again, I caught the faint apparition of Julia Lessinger, lost in contemplating the skyscrapers now surrounding us like the towering blue woods of Sorcerer's Grove. For a moment, I wanted a quick peek into this girl's soul, to find out what truth resided there. She was searching for something. Damned if I know what it was, but it wasn't beyond Julia Lessinger to come out and tell me. This girl was far from dancing around her desires, even if the drum circle did lay down a heavy beat. City traffic was still steady, even though it was nearing the witching hour between Saturday night and Sunday morning. My flop was now only a few blocks away. Whatever she wanted to ask of me, her time was running out. After this, it would be a Monday morning formality of closing the case and settling the final invoice. At last, she turned to me with an odd smile that conjured up more images of those pain-in-the-ass mountain dragons I had mentioned earlier, sunning themselves in a glen after devouring a herd or two. I'd swear they'd smile in contentment at times like that. I don't think Julie would have appreciated the analogy between herself and a dragon, but both Beauty and Beast had their poetic grace about them. Apart from the obvious differences, Julie was scale-free as far as I could tell. Both shared the look in their eyes, a desire to always stay in the moment of bliss and comfort. In the dim light that filtered into the car from the street lamps, Julie took my hand and began studying it, perhaps wondering what kind of life had roughened my skin. As she turned my hand over and opened it, gently stroking it, letting her long, tapered fingers run the length of my short, stubby ones, I was reminded of just how long it had been since I had known the fun and the physical gratification of a good grundlemalking. Honestly, I didn't think I was her type. What was that human saying about curiosity and a cat? Kitty here was daring to go where few in this world would even think to tread. The driver slowed down the car in front of my building, hazarding a nervous glance in the rearview mirror. He seemed to know this pattern of Julie's. I pulled my eyes away from the back of his head to meet her gaze.
James,
she spoke up to the driver, not taking her eyes off me.
Mr. Baddins and I have some business to discuss tonight. I will give you a ring tomorrow morning.
Miss? He asked nervously. What should I tell Mr. Lessinger?
Tell him whatever you like.
For a suggestion, it sounded awfully like a warning. Poor dink. What was he going to tell Daddy Lessinger? I'm sorry, Mr. Lessinger, but your daughter Julia is currently getting the hardest, wildest tavern tickle by a 4'1" dwarf from an alternate universe. Nah, I didn't think that would go over too well, and I don't relish the idea of taking on his hired muscle outside my flop at 4 a.m, wearing only a bath towel and wielding an axe kept under my pillow. That was sure to get the neighbors talking. I got out of the limo and turned to offer Julie a hand. When she stepped out into the street lamp's harsh glare, it was the first time I had seen her drained of color and emotion. A fleeting moment, but a sobering one nonetheless. I looked over at the driver, who was still trying to figure out what to tell Daddy Lessinger. You heard the girl, I said before closing the car door, locking it with a lift of its handle. Home, James. I remember hearing my key ring hitting the small table by the door, the same table where I keep a yardstick so I can reach light switches. However, I didn't get the chance to grab the ruler this time. Julie had already kicked off her high heels and reached over me to shut the door. Feeling the softness of the tiny area rug underneath her feet, she dropped to her knees. I know this would be a dream come true for humans, but Julie would have to be a gifted contortionist to give me such a delight. To kiss me. Her tongue was soft, and I savored the sweetness of her mouth as I would a fine stout aged and brewed by masters of the masters. She gripped my shoulders tightly, and only the sound of her taking a deep breath filled the room. Once she got her fill of air, a sigh escaped through her nose, accompanied by the gentlest of moans. Perhaps you're thinking that grundlemalking between dwarves and other races is an acquired taste. But ask another race about the experience, and all they can do is smile at the memory. Yeah, we're short, we're fat, we got hair that remains total strangers to combs, and beards so thick that you could lose wood sprites in them. So why was she doing this? Perhaps it was my attitude. We're the bad boys of the good guys, and I don't doubt there was a curiosity factor working here. For her, anyway. As for me, I wasn't going to turn down a night between the sheets with Julia Lessinger. Are you kidding? Our professional relationship is over. We're consenting adults. No problem. Dwarves are underestimated for a lot of things because of their height. One of the biggest myths being that we don't know our way around a woman. The average dwarven family, and let me stress that, average, is 10 dwarflings. There's a reason why dwarven families are so large, and it's not because we love to procreate. Well, we love to procreate, obviously, but that's just it. We look at grundlemalking not as a duty, nor as a chore, but a passionate, full-contact indoor sport. And I'm here to tell you, I am the big bambino of grundlemalking. Julie pulled me closer, refusing to let this lip service cease as she shimmied her way out of that fine evening dress. It became ever clearer that the kiss at the door was merely me swinging to in the batter circle before taking the plate. The frantic stripping of our clothes brought back a lot of memories of grundlemalking in this world that had been hasty, impulsive, and fleeting. Tonight was a step closer to home, where we dwarves took our time in making these intimate moments last. Still, I had to be careful. I kept wanting to lose myself in her arms, to try and grasp some kind of belief that she wanted me. I couldn't deny wondering about her intentions, her real reason for tonight. The more I lingered on this, the harder I kissed her. The harder I kissed her, the harder other parts of me became. Julie stepped back, gasping for air. The blinds of my apartment cast horizontal shadows across that beautiful face of hers, and in her eyes dwelled a blind fury of emotions. She had to be wondering what was turning her on, but by the way she had just ripped open my shirt, I don't think she cared. Her hands brushed along the bushy auburn hair covering my chest and followed the curves of my belly with a fairy's touch. That was when she gave a slight gasp, whether from the size of my beer gut or the reality that she was molesting a Highlands dwarf, I couldn't say. Julie stared at my body with morbid fascination.
I don't normally like hairy chests,
she whispered. I slid off the suspenders, letting them hang from my waistband as I removed the rest of my dress shirt. Just wait until you see my back. She finally stood up and looked over her shoulder at the modest bed, silently calling to us both. It was big enough for two, not because of the frequency of my nocturnal guests, mind you. I tend to roll around a lot in my sleep. Not tonight, though. Not tonight. Julie took a few steps further from me and quickly slipped out of her camisole. Even in the medley of light and shadow, I could tell her body lived up to everything I had imagined. Her toned legs seemed to have no end, but where they finally did was a destination that promised sweet pleasures that would last well into the morning. The same horizontal shadows that touched her face also adhered to her stomach, curved and tight in all the right places. Her breasts were now in the open air, and from the looks of her tight, hard nipples, they were all the happier to be free of concealment. Plus, my earlier assumption was confirmed. Julia Lessinger's body was indeed devoid of dragon scales. I must have been eyeing her like a gourmet meal because when I finally made eye contact with her again, she was smiling. A strange form of flattery, but I could see she enjoyed being fawned over. Most of the guys at Daddy's party that was leagues away from us now, played that game of disinterest, of ennui in the presence of undeniable beauty. From the upper crust pretty boys to a dwarf detective, huh? All right, Julie, I'll play your game tonight. She needed some education anyway, and class was most assuredly in session. I took her by the hips and pushed her past the bed, not stopping until we hit the wall. The impact earned me a delighted cry from my new pupil. In the moments that slipped by after I parted her legs, she discovered one of the reasons why I loved being a dwarf. By the sound of her moans that grew into louder and louder wails of excitement as I continued to savor her, she couldn't help but love that I was a dwarf. Julie nearly collapsed on top of me as her body shuddered from waves of erotic spasms that hit her hard, again and again. Her harpy imitation now subsided into gasps and sighs of relief, pleasure, and expectation for what was to come. Taking another deep breath, she pulled herself free of the wall and staggered to the bed, where she crawled on top of the covers, turning to face me. Not that I would have minded if she faced in the other direction. Even walking away from me, the view was lovely. A reminder of the rolling moors and breathtaking valleys of Griffinos. She gave a purr while on all fours, her hair falling like a veil across half of her face. She looked at me and sighed as another aftershock passed through her body.
Billy.
She wanted me to drop the boxers and let loose, but first, I wanted to make sure she knew what was heading her way. Billy's battle axe, I called it when scouring the taverns with my drinking pals in search of a quick grundlemalk. Slipping my hands inside the waistband, I pulled the boxers down just low enough for them to be loose, and then let them fall. The light from outside was hitting me just right, and I watched Julie's jaw drop slowly at the heat I was packing. She blinked, and then finally swallowed the lump that was forming in her throat.
Billy.
This was the worst assumption that human women always made about dwarves. There's no real way to prepare a woman outside of my race for the hard reality. It is a truth that so many races are oblivious to, and this ignorance continues in this world to mislead the opposite sex. Tonight, Julie Lessinger would discover the third advantage in being a dwarf. There is a difference between being short and being small. My eyes opened slowly, the sunlight streaming through the blinds rudely reminding me that it was time to get my ass out of bed and get a head start on the final paperwork for the Lessinger case. I was sore. Last night, my Lady Trouble performed contortions and acrobatics that would make a court jester green with envy. I couldn't recall the last time a woman had given me a workout like that. I know it was back in Acryonis, and she might have been a crossblood, but Julie had outshone them all. As I stretched like a mountain lion after enjoying its prey, a single thought repeated again and again in my head. Worth the wait. A cursory glance at the surrounding walls reassured me that the paint was still there. The worry that her screams were going to remove it off the walls crossed my mind several times last night. I moved to get up, but my muscles let me know just how stupid of an idea that was. Guess Julie Lessinger wouldn't be the only one walking funny today. Eventually, I rolled over to the edge of the bed and gave another good stretch, locking my fingers and reaching above me with a hearty groan. I tipped my head as far to the left as I could, and a very satisfying pop, 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 pop resounded in my head. Nothing like a good night's grundlemalking to rejuvenate the spirit and ease the brain. I felt like a new dwarf, ready to receive the last payment from Miss Now I Know the Truth About Dwarves Lessinger, and then find the sword of Acryonis before Capone or the feds. Yeah, Sunday was going to be a good day, provided I didn't get thrown out by the landlord for making too much noise the night before. I opened the window slightly. An advantage to where my flop was located in this modest building was that I could usually catch the breeze off the lake, and on a day like today, it would freshen up the place. I then noticed another pleasant scent tickling my nose. That fresh ground scent that greeted me on the mornings when I'd have breakfast at Mick's. My coffee pot was already on the stove, and still warm with the burner underneath it at its lowest setting. Next to an empty mug sat my sugar bowl. In the center of the modest table, where, on mornings like this, I would usually treat myself to a cream of wheat topped with honey, a strong pot of tea, and some toast lightly buttered, the memo pad I kept in my kitchen for grocery lists, messages, and the like waited for me with its pencil resting across it, placed very purposefully so I wouldn't miss it. The message was written with a refined hand, a hand that had grown up surrounded by privilege and elegance at all times. Either Julie must have been one early riser or able to wear me out to the point of me being lost in a deep slumber. The note brought a smile to my face.
Billy, to say last night was incredible would be an understatement. I was not sure about where we were headed last night, but it had been such a long time since I'd felt that good. Something in your touch showed me that I needed a little more than just a private eye on the payroll. You're not what I expected, and I hope last night won't be our last. I'll call you Monday, Big Red. J. P.S. I helped myself to some coffee and sugar. I brewed enough for you, too. I hope I didn't make it too strong.
Big Red. Hey, I like that. Never been called Big Red before. I ripped out the note from the memo pad and walked over to the corkboard I had by the door, laughing to myself as I crossed the modest flop. Even on its last day, the case was getting crazier by the minute. Okay, sure. Maybe she was just interested in another repeat training session with Billy's battle axe. But I was intending to enjoy this day for everything it was worth. The corkboard, high enough for me to notice it as I was going out, had numerous scraps of paper. Some of the scraps were reminders of rent and other bills due. My eye fell on the reminder to keep an eye on Benny, just in case he was deciding to branch out in his moonlighting to other areas of Capone's business. Why stop at embezzlement? I had written on this scrap of paper. I guess that note could come down. I pushed the thumbtack into the cork surface with a good solid shove. With a self-gratifying nod, I stared at the note. The morning breeze played with the paper, gently lifting it against the thumbtack along with the other notes surrounding it. Yeah, today was going to be a good day.
Well,
Chided the man over the jingle of his diner's door.
if it ain't the Sherlock Holmes of Chicago. Good to see you walking above ground, Scrappy.
Good to be above ground, you crazy Pollock. I snapped back, taking my usual seat at the end of the bar. Think you got a Sunday special back there with my name on it?
Let me take a look.
Sundays were always slow in the city. But after spending quality time with the clerics, priests, and other holy men of this realm, spending an hour whipping up a lunch for the family just didn't make anyone rejoice. Mick's Diner was a popular stop for the families in their church best, and today was, as I mentioned before, a good day. For me, it was the end of one of the riskiest cases of my career. For Mick, it was business as usual. And as usual, business couldn't be better.
Okay, Baddins, here you go.
Mick presented a modest toasted sandwich before me with a side of what looked like a hearty chicken noodle soup. What? I stared at the soup. The hell? I peeked at the sandwich, burning my fingertips on its melted cheese. Is this?
Billy,
Mick shook his head, clicking his tongue.
you shouldn't be talking like that on the Lord's Day.
Well, some God-fearing Christians would have a problem with you earning a living on the Lord's official day off. Ah, the shrug. I love Mick's
What are you talking about?
shrug. His magical shield against my verbal slings and arrows.
Hey, come on, Billy. I'm doing the Lord's work here, encouraging fellowship outside of his house and feeding his flock.
A regular good Samaritan, ain't you, Mick? I sighed heavily, motioning to the dish. And now I ask again, what the hell is this?
Today's special.
Mick rolled his eyes at the expression I was giving him.
Billy, man does not live by Reuben and chili alone. That goes double for a dwarf.
He said, proudly poking me in the chest.
That is homemade chicken soup. And that
He motioned to the sandwich.
is a ham and cheese toasted on the grill just enough so that it melts in your mouth.
This is not the Sunday special, I grumbled.
This is this Sunday's special.
Mick slapped me on my arm and beamed.
Dig in and enjoy.
This is a Sunday special. Giving another disgruntled grumble, I took a spoonful of the chicken noodle soup, which had cooled to a comfortable temperature by now. I must admit, not bad.
So, Sherlock Scrappy, you think now you can talk about this hush-hush case of yours?
You would think Mick would leave well enough alone, but not this crazy Pollock. Now, what part of private in my vocation completely eludes you? Mick, I gotta...
Nah. I don't want names or anything like that. Just some of the details, you know. Come on. Let me see what it's like in your world.
My world. A funny choice of words there, Mick. Well, let me tell you something, pal. My world is definitely not for the faint of heart.
How so?
Ever see a guy in full armor bitten in two by a low-flying dragon? It's complicated, Mick. Very complicated. I slurped down one of the longer noodles and chewed on it for a moment while eyeballing Mick. I wasn't going to get off the hook that easily. Okay, I could probably get away with telling you this. Those troglodytes who paid your place a visit earlier?
You mean...
And then Mick leaned in, his voice dropping to his detective's whisper.
Moran's boys?
Yeah, I whispered back. Those guys. They're not going to be bugging your establishment in the future. Mick cocked his head to one side.
Now, how can you be so sure?
Well, when I had dinner with Capone...
Capone?
He shouted, causing many of his diners to stop and look our way. And this? I nodded, giving my chicken soup a break and picking up a still warm slice of the sandwich. Is exactly why you are not a detective, but still one of the best cooks in town. I took an orc-sized bite of the ham and cheese, as I had worked up a healthy appetite from the night before. And in about my third chew, I paused. I gave another chew. My next one was a bit slower, and I could feel a somewhat pensive look creeping across my face. Mick noticed.
Billy?
Well, okay. Maybe not the best cook anymore, I said, my mouth still full of sandwich.
Problem with the sandwich?
I nodded. You got the melt in your mouth part right, I replied, chewing as I spoke. And this is definitely cheese, but it ain't cheddar. And this ham tastes a lot like salami.
What?
He immediately tore the second half of the sandwich apart.
I swear.
He growled.
Sometimes I wish I wasn't such a sucker for the hardships.
I swallowed down the first bite. Couldn't help it. I was hungry. Well, it's not a bad taste, just unique. Guess nobody said anything because you are the master of the chili. They probably thought you were trying something different.
I am. His name is Petro. Good kid, but a little lacking in the communication skills. He tends to be hanging on to the ways of the old country. Know what I mean?
Yeah. I chuckled, venturing another bite of the odd-tasting sandwich. I know. This time, it was harder to finish. I turned back to the soup. So this kid charmed his way into a job, huh?
Well, he whipped that soup together, and I was pretty impressed, so I told him what I wanted for this Sunday, but he kept insisting on the salami instead of just plain old ham. I got a little gruff with him, and he started saying why it should be salami and not ham, and the longer he argued with me, the more Italian he threw in. We got to a point where that was all he was speaking.
That's my Mick, I said with a grin. Lord and master of his castle, but still willing to let the servants get in the last word.
Well, I didn't think I was letting him get the last word.
Mick scoffed.
I didn't understand a damn word of that Italian. It was all Greek to me.
Now there was a new one on me. Come again?
Oh, another saying you're not familiar with, huh?
He chuckled.
Well, unless you're really educated or you're from Greece, you can't understand Greek, right? So, if you don't understand something, we say, it's all Greek to me.
I sat there, noodling through the quirky saying.
It's all Greek to me.
If no one else understands it, it's all Greek. But what about the other way around? You stick with a language near and dear to you because no one else understands it. The Italians, the Chinese, even I do it sometimes. Why? Because it's all Greek to everyone else. Everyone else, save for those few who know Greek.
It's all Greek to me.
That's a good one. Holy shit. I slapped a Lincoln on the bar. Keep the change. Mick blinked.
Billy, I just flipped through the other half of your sandwich as if it were a good book. I owe you.
I adjusted my fedora and hopped down from my bar stool. No, my friend, I'm the one who owes you.
For what?
For a bit of higher education from the streets. I smiled, tipping my hat to him. Talk to you later.